So this is a very interesting, very ancient piece of siltstone, single piece, and it's two-sided, which shows that it was used for ceremonial purposes rather than practical. And it's called the Narmer palette too. So Narmer was pretty much the earliest pharaoh that we know of. We don't know who created this, but take a look at this interlocking pair of creatures. Now they've got the body of a lioness, but then almost a giraffe-like a neck, and they've never been identified. You can see the figures that are, seeming to stand on tails, but they could be standing on some sort of stilts, and they've got them harnessed. So it's almost like they're directing them, maybe in a mating ritual. And then if you take a look at the top, you see the ox or the bull. And if you go over to this side, you see Narmer. It's also known as Menes, but that is actually an honorary title. It means one who endures. So it's a very interesting piece. They've never figured out a lot of symbology. Now, if you go look at this place, it looks like there's a pageant. And Narmer basically conquered his enemy and united Upper and Lower Egypt, southern and northern Egypt. So this is probably, 3150 BC, really early. That's bordering on the dynastic period and pre-dynastic. So let's talk about it. So if you start to look at the world and you start to study paleoclimates, for instance, something happened to the Earth right around that time, 3150, 3200 BC. We don't have an exact date on this thing. We know that it was found in a tomb or a crypt that was dedicated to Horus. It was a falcon god that we all know about. And if you start to take a look around the world, take Greenland, for instance. There was this huge spike of sulfate concentration in the Greenland ice. We know that from core studies, and this spike happened right around 3150 to 3200 BC. And so scientists have argued, was it a comet? Was it a volcano? Was it a swamp? They still fight about it. But there's also evidence that there was a great fog right around that time that, lowered the temperature, and it left its mark on trees, on ice cores, and you saw crazy things happen. You saw the Dead Sea rose 300 feet right around 3200 BC. And, at that time, the Jordan River must have been like Hawaii, filled with life and, tropical and all that. If you start looking into areas in Europe, you go to Belfast, and you can see these ochre dendrochronology samples where right around 3150 to 3200 BC, you see a major climate event. And you see that in samples, dendrochronology samples in Germany with what they call Moraken. It's a swamp oak. It's actually used to make furniture in Swabia and other areas. And so you see that around the world. It looks global. And you saw it here in the American Southwest. just start, looking into paleo flooding studies, and you'll see something happened. Something hit us. And you can look at Morocco and Arizona and Mesopotamia, and you see this climatic disturbance. They call it a Peoria oscillation. And so that could account for all sorts of chaos, including the chaos that actually ended up bonding the Egyptian culture. So you start to think about what would happen. You have something strike us. You would see a heating up, but then abrupt cooling at higher latitudes. And, then you see these megalith cultures going through these gyrations. And you see all sorts of, well, if you're a geologist, you look for alluvial deposition in the river valleys areas. You see that in San Fernando Valley. You see that in, that's where I grew up. You see that in, the lower Tigris, Euphrates Valley, and it's there. So something happened, and it ended up unifying the Egyptian kingdom. It was separate prior. So, it's interesting, and there's a lot of research, and even in Utah, there's evidence of climatic perturbation, I guess you would call it. So, there's more to this, and going to have to do a lot more research. Of course, keep in mind there's lots of climatic events which show up, throughout history, throughout all of history in a geological sense. But it does seem to provide some evidence that these flood myths that show up geographically everywhere do have a root basis in fact. So that's my question, which is, what would make the Dead Sea rise 300 feet? That's an event. It's quite an event. Something like that would drown LA, right? So there's still no conclusions, and I personally believe it was probably a chunk of a comet. And you have to understand that Stonehenge was built around the same time. You saw a lot of cultures, paleo cultures around the world suddenly want to look to the stars, and you saw new priests rise up in power because they were the interpreters of the stars. So, it's you see it in the Bible, right? You see it everywhere. So something happened. Something happened, that created kitchen middens in places. Something happened that made fertile places arid. Something happened that, is evidenced in the Epic of Gilgamesh, the tale of Utna Pishtim, right? And so there's a lot more research to be done, and we really need to understand what events cause things. What happened in Crete, right? That caused an 800-foot tidal wave, right? What happened prior to that? The what they call the phaeton explosion, which was 10,000 BC. And an interesting fact is, when the first pharaoh, when they call early dynastic period, 3200 BC, happened. That's when the Mayan year counting happened. We still had woolly mammoths on the planet. So, that's where the tales of Atlantis and Lemuria and Mu all come from. And you see it everywhere. Look at the paleoclimates in Japan during the what they call the Jomon period, Joumon, and that would be, middle Jomon period would be 32 to 3500 BC, and so it's everywhere, and people have just not pieced it together. So it's a puzzle that I'm looking at, and I think everything points to an impact of an asteroid or a comet, and major dust clouds blocking the sun for months and months and months, and as this thing took flight through the Earth's atmosphere, the chunk of comet or the comet headed up on like a 10,000 degree Celsius, which caused a chain reaction between the atmospheric nitrogen and oxygen. And so you had acid rain, a ton of it. You had floods, you had erosions, you had chaos. So, stuff happened. Shit went down. That's all I can say. I'll be looking more into this, but just wanted to kind of share that little piece of history, and we'll look more into King Narmer and the first pharaoh, and what this animal is. We just don't know what this animal is. Okay, over and out.